I would have never thought that I would be homeless, but unfortunately I am.
I called 311 and said, I'm homeless and I need a roof over my kid's head.
Right at the top apartment was mine.
Sheriff's department, come to the door.
I looked out the window and I knew they was coming to put me out.
Out of 13 years, this is the worst it's ever been.
I didn't have anywhere else to go.
There you go.
And I don't want my daughter to go through the same.
The noise down here is horrible, so imagine trying to sleep here.
One man's garbage is another man's treasure.
When you're homeless, that's what you're doing. You're surviving. There's not much room to live.
Bless the homeless and give them shelter. I do believe in God and I have faith that he's gonna bring me out of this.
Just because I'm homeless doesn't mean I've given up on everything else.
We all need help sometimes, and I was willing to take that help.
Good to see you, my dear.
This is what I want my life to be, having a home. This is where I come from.
Being housed would be life-changing.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Tim Russell, VP Community Engagement and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for WTTW and WFMT, and welcome to today's Latino Voices, a WTTW News Community Conversation. What you just saw was the trailer to WTTW's Firsthand Homeless digital series. On February 19th, we launched what will be a year-long initiative, Firsthand Homeless, through a series of documentaries, expert talks, and ongoing news coverage and community engagement, in which we will present analysis of complex issues at hand, the organizations and people who are working hard to find solutions and opportunities for authentic conversation. And we will introduce you to the people who are every day experiencing homelessness in Chicago firsthand. I hope you will explore the documentary series and related content of the project website at wttw.com/firsthand through the coming year. Before we get things going, I'd like to extend a very special thanks to our supporters, who you can see listed here on the screen. The generous support of these donors, sponsors, and WTTW members and viewers like you make it possible for WTTW to bring provocative ideas to life, to tackle the issues that matter, and to expand our perspectives on the world in which we live. There is only one reason why this is possible, and that reason is you. Thank you for your support. Now, please welcome our host, Joanna Hernandez.
Hello and welcome to Latino Voices, a WTTW News Community Conversation. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. I'm Joanna Hernandez. Today we'll be discussing homelessness. With over 6,000 people in the city of Chicago experiencing homelessness, the need is continually growing. We'll speak to those working directly with Chicago's unhoused population to understand what work is being done, barriers to finding help, and possible solutions. This is in partnership with WTTW's Firsthand Homelessness series, a year-long initiative to uncover the issues unhoused individuals face to create discussion and explore solutions. You're all in listen mode only, but that doesn't mean you can't be part of the conversation. We want to hear from you, so please chime in on the chat function with your questions and comments. I'll try to share them with our guest. Now let's start by introducing our guest. First up is José Munoz, the Executive Director of La Casa Norte, an organization that aims to develop initiative solutions to poverty, hunger, and housing and create healthier communities across Chicago. We have Marty Castro, President and CEO of Casa Central, an organization providing social services to families and individuals across the city. And Raul Gonzalez, a founding member of the Ojalá Foundation, a Latino Muslim organization, and organizer with the Neighborly Deeds Initiative, which brings food and basic needs to unhoused residents on the Southwest Side. Now, thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us. Now, I want to start with everyone. If we can quickly just kind of go around, I would love to hear more about your story and what brought you to do this work. Jose, I would like to start with you.
Well, thank you, first of all, for having me here today to talk about this important topic. You know, for me, the issue of homelessness is near and dear to my heart. It's really more of a personal journey. I experienced homelessness as a child with my family, and then again as a young adult on my own. And so it took me, from the time I was 18 to almost 30, it took me about a decade to really get to a point where I was secure in my housing. And so I brought all of those memories and all those thoughts, and that experience of being homeless, both as a child and as a young adult, to the work that I do to La Casa Norte. It's not easy, having to experience homelessness. It's also not easy when you're housing insecure. I always tell folks that, one of the things that, most difficult things is when you're homeless, you're not really thinking about the future. You're thinking about how you're going to survive and what you're going to do next. And that's not a good way to live. You can't think about the future. You can't think about education. You can't think about systemic issues or community or anything else, because you're really just thinking about where your next meal or where you're going to live next, or how you're going to shelter. And so I bring that experience with me every day to La Casa Norte when I come to work, and to the communities that we serve.
Something personal to you. And Marty, same question to you.
Sure. So I came to Casa Central about 8 years ago as I was finishing my work as chair of the Civil Rights Commission under President Obama. And I was recruited to Casa, which is a multi-service agency. And one of the big programs that we have here is our La Posada transitional program for homeless families. So it's not your traditional shelter. And when I learned more about the work we were doing here, because my family and I, my kids in particular, we would take them to volunteer at homeless shelters throughout the Chicago area as they were growing up. And what we do is so much different than a lot of that, because we're not just, here's a cot and here's a bag of toiletries and here's the line that you stand in for food. We house individual families in a group setting that is individual. That is, each of them have an apartment. If you weren't aware that that building was La Posada, you would not know that it was any different than any other apartment building in Humboldt Park. So we make sure that the dignity of those families is intact. Just because they're unhoused doesn't mean that they lack dignity. And as we put that roof over their head, which is the most important thing, as Jose was saying, you can't think of anything else unless you have a roof over your head. And not just any roof, too. We could talk about doubling up issues later, but we also provide wraparound services, training for jobs, and teaching folks how to save, making sure they have childcare while they go out and look for a job, making sure they have transportation to get to those job interviews. So it is a holistic approach of a family unit, whatever you call your family unit, right? They don't have to be a traditional family. If those folks say we are a family, then we respect that and we provide them with that service.
Thank you for sharing that. And Raul, we actually worked together on a story. I actually followed you as you and your team were giving out clothes and food. So tell me a little bit about your story.
Alhamdulillah. So, there was a need, and Ojalá Foundation was made. It was created because of a need. We saw so many people, on the bridges, traveling to go to work or traveling to go to be with my family to go eat. We got to pass that are hungry, people that are cold, people that are, are dealing with hopelessness. And so as Ojalá Foundation, we decided that we have to assist them. Or actually the word Ojalá means hope. And so this is what we do. We want to give hope to those who are hopeless, are going through hopelessness, and let them know that there is hope. There is hope. There's a lot of people out here like me and the fellow panelists and yourself that want to assist the people, that need to assist the people, for us and for our children, so that they can see, us doing something to make a change, so that when it's their turn, they too will make a change.
And Raul, you started in the basement. I remember you said that you're handing out peanut butter and jellies, and now you have an entire team of people handing out soup and different things. And this is what neighborhood? Pilsen and Humboldt Park?
Yes, Pilsen. The Pilsen area is our primary target. Okay, and we go through all different neighborhoods, Tent City. We go through all the different, everywhere where we know that the homeless congregate. And, we're spreading out more. We're having more volunteers join the group. So we're able to reach more people.
And where would you say that passion came from for you?
I was hungry one time. I remember when I was a child, we were very poor. We were very, very poor. And we needed, no one was there for us. So I can make a change. We can make Ojalá Foundation came together for the purpose of making a change.
That's really awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing that. And Jose, I want to go to you. Can you explain what is considered unhoused?
Yeah, I mean, so there's the literal definition of what being unhoused means, which is what the federal government uses to allocate funds. And those are folks that are living on the streets or literally are staying at a shelter. They don't have a home. But the broader definition, and really is the way we should be looking at homelessness, are, what really over 68,000 people in the city of Chicago are facing is it's not just the literal homelessness, but also the experience of being doubled up. Being bouncing around from place to place, not knowing where your next home is going to be, not knowing where your next meal is going to come from. For some, it looks differently. I can tell you from my own experience, homelessness meant living out of a car at some points, and other times bouncing around and staying with different people, trying to figure out who would let me in for the night, or sleeping at work. That's what homelessness looks like. And unfortunately, for the vast majority of Chicagoans, they're not counted when it comes to homelessness. They're an invisible population of individuals who are experiencing homelessness, and particularly for Latinos. 90% of Latinos in the city of Chicago are homeless and doubled up and aren't counted in our traditional system because they're not staying at shelters, or they're not getting picked up as being literally homeless, which means that they're not able to access services or housing programs, and or are able to get into permanent housing, or be able to obtain some of those subsidies. So it's really important that, as we think about homelessness, that we really look at that broader definition of homelessness, so that we're talking about what Marty mentioned earlier, again, was that doubled up population.
And Marty, I want to go to you. Tell me a little bit, you mentioned about the wraparound service, but tell me more about the organization, the people that you work with, and how do you reach out to these individuals?
Yeah, well, La Posada in particular, we work in tandem with the city of Chicago and Salvation Army. So our intake is from those organizations. We don't necessarily go out and bring people to our facility independently. And so as a result of that, we are seeing what happens to be happening in the microcosm of the world around us. So when Hurricane Maria struck, we saw a lot of refugees coming from Puerto Rico. And so they came into the pipeline through local government officials that sent them to us. And now, of course, we see the growing number of migrants from Latin America. In fact, right now, 40% of our housing stock in La Posada, our apartments, are taken by individuals who are considered the newcomer migrants and refugees. And so for us, we very much feel the impact of the world around us. We even had Afghan refugees here when the U.S. was pulling out of Afghanistan a couple years ago. So we have to respond to crises, not only in Humboldt Park, but literally in this country and the world around us. And when we do that, as I said, it's not just here's an apartment. Folks live as though they are living in a regular apartment, but because of the wraparound services, it's meant to make them independent, make them able to actually go on to affordable housing when that affordable housing
and that's what I was about to ask. Is it a transition to
it
move,
is totally,
so people can move on, and then other people could take advantage
absolutely.
of these apartments?
Are designed as a transitional program. You can stay with us up to 2 years. Some folks leave earlier, some are at the 2-year mark now. The challenge we're seeing in that transition, even as we've gotten people to be able to save, we've gotten them to be able to get job training, they still cannot move on. In fact, we've got about 9 or 10 families right now that are ready to move on, but they can't for a number of reasons, chief among them that there is no affordable housing for them to move on to. So then that creates a ripple effect backing up the entire system when we have families who are literally on the streets or in tents who could come to our facility, and we have families in our facility that are ready to move on. We find a number of factors. One, the Chicago Low-Income Housing Trust, a lot of landlords don't work with that trust. And those that can apply don't apply, and then there's a backup there. Then we also see the fact that in Chicago, we have a lot of violence, right? And so to the extent some affordable housing may be available, it is in communities that are suffering a whole host of other disinvestments. And so some families don't want to go there. So there's this just a large, intricate pattern of
How would you say you work around that? You know, how do you work through that?
Yeah, the best we can do is one of the things that we were doing, and we continue to do at Casa Central, and I know Jose's organization is involved in this as well. We have been strong advocates to bring Chicago home. Even before it became a ballot initiative pre-pandemic, Casa Central signed on to that. For those of you who don't know, it's an initiative that would initially start out as maybe a city ordinance, and then it became a ballot initiative. And on Friday, the court ruled that it's no longer valid, but it would charge an additional percentage on homes of $1 million or more. And those funds in Chicago would go into a trust fund that could be used to address these very challenges we're talking about here that are clogging the system. But a court on Friday ruled that unconstitutional. The opinion will come out today, but it's still on the ballot. And because the early voting has started, so we're still encouraging folks, go out there and vote for this initiative on your ballot. If you're in Chicago, this will be appealed. And if the appeal is successful, then and the ballot initiative passes, then we can see it. If it isn't, then we'll go back to the drawing board, because we have to come up with innovative ideas to get around these log jams. If we keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, that's the perfect definition of insanity and bad public policy.
And Raul, I want to go to you. Your job is very, hands-on. You're out in the ground. Can you tell me a little bit about, give us a sense of what unhoused people, or people that you've spoken with, are experiencing? That's to you, Raul. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
To me?
Yes, to you.
I'm sorry. Can you?
Yeah, of course I can repeat that 100%. I said a lot of your work is very hands-on. You're on the ground with your team. I mean, I was with you. It was about 6 to 9 o'clock. So that's the night hour. Can you tell me a little bit about what are these people experiencing? I remember seeing people sleeping by the library, sleeping by schools. Tell me a little bit, give us a sense of what they're experiencing.
Okay, well, again, they're out there, they find themselves in a revolving door of hopelessness, drug addiction, alcohol abuse. Some people are dealing with, slight insanity. You have to be, to go out there. You have an option to go to a shelter, and you choose to go under a bridge, and it's 13 degrees below zero, and you're on a cardboard, but you can be in a shelter. Some people don't want to do the shelter rules. That doesn't mean that they still don't deserve to eat or don't deserve compassion or and it's not just a handout. We're not just trying to hand out. What we're trying to hand out is, again, hope. Our organization, Ojalá Foundation, we are an Islamic Dawah organization. Dawah means to invite. Invite to what? Invite to think. We're inviting people to think. We have questions as well. So we're not giving that. We can't give everybody the answers, because we're looking for answers ourselves. But we're giving people invitation to think. What can you do about changing your current situation? What can you do? What are you doing? A lot of people don't have identification. They lost it in a fire or whatever their situation is. They don't have identification. They don't have any job opportunities available. They haven't showered in weeks. They don't have clothes to go to job interviews. So we are giving them opportunities. We bring them clothes. We bring them now, inshallah, God willing, we're hooking up with an organization that has a mobile shower so that they could come around and take showers. And we're going to, what we're trying to do is getting them out of that revolving door and giving them hope and giving them, because a lot of the homeless that we serve, and that's what we're doing, we're serving them. They say, oh, I don't have identification, I don't have a job, and they're stuck in that revolving door. And so we, as Muslims, because that's who we are, we're a Muslim organization. We come and we want to let them know that God hasn't forgotten them. That their situation shouldn't mean that it's over. It should mean it's a start. Let's start something new. Let's make a change. Like the brother said, if you keep doing what you always did, you're going to keep getting what you always got. So we're trying to institute in them, an opportunity for change. And how do we do that? By showing them that they're not forgotten, because a lot of them think that no one cares for them. So they're okay. No one cares for me. Now, why should I even care for myself? And mind you, that's a horrible way of thinking.
Is
But
that
we have
Raul?
to-
Is that what you constantly see, that people who are homeless or experiencing homelessness sleeping outside, that they feel that they just are forgotten?
Yeah. Oh, Supana, it's horrible. And then with the Latinos, a lot of the Latinos that we run into, they don't want to go to shelters because they're worried about the immigration. You know, maybe they're undocumented, they don't have any paperwork, so they're concerned with that. You know, so we at Ojalá Foundation, we're attempting to give them. You know, we take names regularly so that we can follow up with the homeless that we meet. And if there's opportunities available for them, maybe getting identification, getting medical cards, getting them to help, not
And
just
this is all volunteer based, correct? Everyone who volunteers.
no one in Ojalá Foundation is on the clock. No one gets paid. We've been doing this now for 6 years, okay, and we started out with 2-3 brothers. And now, I mean, we have up to 50 volunteers sometimes. And mind you, it's Chicago in the winter, okay? Friday night. People have been working all week, and now it's Friday night, 8 o'clock. Where do you find us? 19th and Western, preparing meals out there in the cold. And we're cold. I remember a couple weeks ago, I was so cold. And I remember thinking, well, you know what? At the end of the night, I'm going to go home. My home is nice and warm. I'm gonna take a nice warm shower. I'm gonna eat something. I'll be all right. These people that we're serving, we are in their living rooms. We're in the middle of their kitchen, the streets. Okay, they will not be out of the cold. They will not be out of the cold till sometime in April when the weather changes.
I think that's something that stuck with me when I was out with you. It was cold that day when we were out shooting. It was cold as the night progressed. It started getting colder, and I mean, I was able to run to my car, right, and turn on the heater. And I think every volunteer mentioned that we have the privilege of going into our car. So there's 2 questions here, Jose. One of them is for you. Someone asked, you mentioned some statistics about 90%, and they said, where does this fact come from?
Yeah, if you look at the Chicago Coalition for the Homeless has a report that they put out every year. They'll give you some stats and information on, how many people are experiencing homelessness. In particular, they have one stat about the number of individuals that are experiencing are in doubled up situations. For Latinos, that number is actually about 91% of Latinos are experiencing homelessness. I do want to touch on something Raul mentioned, and he was talking about volunteerism and how important that is. I agree. I think it's great to have volunteers to come out and support services. One thing to keep in mind is that there is no one solution to ending homelessness. It's a very complex issue, and it requires very different interventions. And I can give you an example of some of the work that we're doing at La Casa Norte. We primarily serve youth and families who are experiencing homelessness or housing instability. We operate 3 shelters in the city of Chicago, 1 on the south side and back of the yards, 2 in Logan Square, all for youth between the ages of 18 and 21. One's a pregnant and parenting program, but we also do transitional housing. We have permanent supportive housing. We have about 60 units of scatter site housing. In our main building, we have 25 units of housing. We operate a food program, a food pantry in partnership with Nourishing Hope. We have a health clinic that's operated by Howard Brown, and we also have a youth drop-in center. And I mentioned all those different programs because it's important to recognize that all those different programs work together. Because we know that it's not just enough to get someone housed for a night. We have to be looking for more long-term permanent solutions. Things like permanent supportive housing or getting folks rapidly housed and getting them right out of homelessness, because we know that that's the most successful way to really get them out of homelessness is to find a permanent setting.
You just mentioned all these services, and I guess sometimes when I'm out shooting stories or I'm talking with people, Marty, you could chime in as well. It seems like there's all these services, but it's still not enough.
Oh, no,
when you're out, it just seems there's all these services, and I always encounter people who need help, or I give them the 311 number or the number that could help them, but it just never feels like it's enough.
Well, so going back to that number, right? So we're looking at those folks that are literally homeless, and those who are experiencing homelessness because they were doubled up. What we're not talking about is the number of individuals that are also on the fringe of being homelessness. And, we saw that during the pandemic. If you recall, when the pandemic first struck, we saw unprecedented number of individuals that were looking for food, that were looking for housing. When things started shutting down throughout the city, and to give you an idea what that looked like for La Casa Norte, we went from serving 5,000 people to over 24,000 at our peak because of the need that's out there. We're still hovering around 20,000 people served every year throughout our various different programs. So that need hasn't subsided, even though now, a lot of folks aren't thinking about the pandemic and, they were coming out on the other side of it. But the reality is that the need is still there. And so those services, to your point, there's not enough services that are going on. Marty brought up something earlier about the Bring Chicago Home referendum and how important that is. If that referendum were to pass, if we were to have which would create a dedicated fund to support homelessness, that would be about $100 million that would be brought into the city of Chicago to address the issue of homelessness. That's more money that we spend on the entire system.
She would say this would really be a game changer.
It would be historic. It would change the way we operate services. It would create an opportunity. And I take it a step further. People talk about it as an issue of homelessness. It's much bigger than that. Having $100 million to create permanent supportive housing, not only creates an opportunity to house more people, but it starts changing how we react as a city. I mentioned earlier, when you're thinking about when you don't have a roof over your head or you don't have a food in your belly, you're not thinking about the future. You're thinking about what your next meal or where you're going to have a roof, how are you going to get housed that day. We're seeing that becoming a trend across the city of Chicago. So in order for our city to get out of that survival mode where we're thinking about, how we're going to get past this next summer, how are we going to get past this next year with homelessness, how are we going to get past this issue with the migrant crisis that we're facing right now, we got to stop thinking with short-term solutions. We really got to focus over the long run and focus on what can we do so that we can create a path to get people housed over the long run. And Bring Chicago Home, it does it. It not only creates that funding, but it creates funding for years to come. It's a historic opportunity for the city of Chicago, and it's a historic opportunity to really take a hard look at doing something about homelessness in Chicago.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We have another question here. Casa Central, it says, Casa Central is working with families experiencing homelessness. What are some of the differences in responding to the needs of youth experiencing homelessness?
Sure. And we serve the entire family from, just born to the oldest in the family. So we have a series of ranges of needs that are within our La Posada program participants. So as it relates to our kids, how many we have in that program depends totally on the families that come to us. So we have children in early learning, and we have a very robust early learning program here at Casa Central, both center-based and home-based. So we can actually provide that need for the youth, the youngest youth. We have an after-school program that children who are that age, 12 years old and above can go into that program. And we also ensure that the teens that are part of our program get the same wraparound services. So a lot of this is based on who is composing those particular families. They get after school homework change and support, computer training. So we try to provide the entire family with the needs that they have at whatever stage of life they happen to be. And one of the other things we've noticed, particularly as we're dealing with some of the migrant families, sometimes it is an issue of lack of services and support out there, but other times it's about a lack of coordination of those services. And one thing we've been hearing from our migrant families is that as we and others try to serve them, and there's money there for them for housing, but they're getting calls from different organizations or different governmental agencies, and they're overwhelmed. So a part of it is that it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. So we have to bring better coordination to those areas where there are resources and services. The other challenge we've seen, particularly with young migrant families, is the ability, for example, with our early learning program, if they're moving from shelter to shelter, right? They're moving them around like chess pieces. And so it's hard for us to follow those families and continue to provide them with services. So that's another challenge we need to find and coordinate for, is that services that may be out there need to be brought in a way that can be presented to families that could be utilized by those families. But another point Raul made, and you made about being out there in extreme weather. One thing we often do not talk about when it relates to issues of unhoused families is the impact of climate change on families and individuals. And we know that climate change has a disproportionate impact on communities of color and immigrant families. I mentioned earlier how we stepped to the plate when Hurricane Maria hit. Those were climate refugees. Those were not just refugees or traditional unhoused people. They were here because of a climate crisis. And as you look at the countries that the Latino community comes from and the communities that we serve in Latin America and the Caribbean, while they only produce 2% of the greenhouse gases, they are disproportionately affected by climate change issues. So that's something we need to think about going forward, is as climate extreme weather causes folks to become unhoused in their home countries, they're going to come here because they have family and relationships here. We need to be able to prepare for that in advance and not just deal with it as the crisis du jour. In addition, when you think about even here at home, we had earlier this year flooding in the southwest side of Chicago in Cicero and Berwyn, and we had families whose homes were devastated. And so that also deals with inextricably the housing issues here and the unhoused issue. So we really have to have a very holistic, large approach to public policy when we're thinking about families and individuals that are unhoused. It's not just about that roof on their head. It's about why they're there in the first place and how do we overcome the challenges in a way that's coordinated and impactful for the long run.
And Marty, you just made me think of something, because I think, sorry, I just wanted to say one thing. I think as humans, we can get so consumed with our lives, right? Our daily lives. And maybe we need to pause and really see that homelessness or people experiencing homelessness is all around us. And I'm just curious, Marty, what would you say is the most difficult part about your job?
Well, what's challenging is when you get families that are ready to move on, right? Like I was mentioning earlier, we have 9 families that right now are ready to go to affordable housing and be independent, but we cannot move them on because the system is broken. And that means we can't bring literally the families that are out there right now in extreme weather and tents and shelters into a process and a program and resources that we know will help them. To me, that is the highest form of frustration, because what we do at La Posada works, and we can't get it to work the way it should be because of these external factors that are impacting not only us, but all providers that are serving the unhoused.
Jose, you were going to mention something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just go back to that point about youth and, the importance of serving youth. As we're looking, I think it's important that we take a particular focus and look at those 18 to 24-year-olds. We have a large group of individuals. There's at least nearly 12,000 unaccompanied youth in the city of Chicago that are experiencing homelessness. And that's not just a danger for the city, it's a danger for those youth. Youth who are unhoused they're more vulnerable and more vulnerable to being exposed to violence. They're more vulnerable to being trafficked, to engage in survival crimes, just to keep a roof over their heads. So it's critical that we focus on the youth. We often, you hear this all the time, right? The youth are our future. The youth is what's going to really make a difference.
And Jose, is that something that you've seen? Like you've seen people like teens experience?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I mentioned, La Casa Norte, we primarily serve youth 18 to 24-year-olds. We have 3 shelters that serve 18 to 24-year-olds, our supportive housing programs, our drop-in programs, but it's just not us.
You see their challenges and the barriers that they face.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we see it every single day. We also see, though, the success cases. I'm very fortunate to be able to meet a lot of the youth in our programs and see what a difference housing can make in their lives. I give you just one quick success story of a young man who came to La Casa Norte through into our transitional housing program. This young man had been, he turned 18 and had to escape a violent situation in his own home. And to get out of his own home, he ended up on the streets. He was bouncing around from shelter to shelter, eventually landed in our solid ground transitional program, where we helped him get back into school. We helped him get back into finish up his high school diploma. We helped him get a job. We helped him find housing. That young man then went on to go to community college, has since gone on to a 4-year university, and aspires to be in the Navy. I mean, this is, success stories like that happen because we first have to focus in on getting them housed. And organizations like La Casa Norte, Covenant House, Ignite, different organizations throughout the city of Chicago that are doing work with young people get to see those same success stories. We know that if you get them early enough, you can get them into housing, you can provide the support services, their whole life can change. I can tell you from personal experience how my life changed when I was finally stably housed. You know, I run a nonprofit organization today. You know, it's a very large organization, but the path that got me here started with me getting housed. When I first found housing, that's the first time I could start thinking about the future and what I could possibly do. I've dedicated my entire career to supporting young people, to doing work in the community, because I know what a difference it could make when you get someone housed. And you know, and so we should never forget that. And all these other things that are going on in the world are just as important, but we got to remember our youth. We cannot forget about them, and we got to start, it has to start with housing.
Thank you for sharing that, Raul. I want to go to you. As we know, homelessness can impact anyone. What have you and your members taken away from doing the work that you do?
Wow, we're exposed to the reality of this society, you know, and it's very, very sad because these people, for instance, last week, one brother who got housing, right? He was on the street for 3 years, I believe it was, and he got housing. So we didn't see him for about a month, 2 months. And all of a sudden, last week, he's back there on the street. And we're like, wait a minute. And, you know, he knows us by name, you know, this guy, because we've been dealing with him, supplying resources to him and others around him. And what happened? Well, this, that, you know, and the sad thing about it is, you know, if you can change your geographically, but the heart needs to have a change. You know, if you're out there drinking, if your whole mindset is, I don't care what happens to me, then all of these resources and organizations, they means nothing to them because they end up going back. What needs to change is the heart. And that's one of the things that Ojalá Foundation propagates, the changing of the heart, the returning to a state of mind that's healthy, a healthy state of mind, you know. And a lot of these organizations, one good thing about these organizations, you know, I work for ICNA Relief at Chicago. I'm a case manager, and I see the Latinos. I'm a Latino case manager. So I see these refugees from Venezuela, from Ecuador, and from Colombia, from all of these places. Their heart has been broken, if you will. And how can you move on if your heart is broken? You know, you end up back in the same situation. Homeless, they're under bridges, in alleys. It's horrifying.
So you're bringing the mental health aspect.
Well, we have to. There has to be a mental health. Most of the people, how can you live on the street? How can you live and go sleep under a bridge and not have your mental health moved? You know, there's an issue. It's more than just the fact that they're out there in the weather. It's more than just, you know, lack of funds. There's something wrong with the heart. And one thing Ojalá Foundation propagates is we need to fix the heart, not just the homeless people. We as volunteers, we're fixing our hearts as well, because we need to do this for our people. We need to do this. You know, that's your gente. That's nuestra gente that's out there on the street. So you're just gonna drive by and drop off something, and that's not good enough. There has to be a follow-up. There has to be and it can't be just a person. It's got to be groups of people. It's got to be the same people that's on the ground, that's sleeping in the street. These are the same groups of people, Latinos, African American, whatever race, whatever you are. Those are the people who need to help you, because no one else is helping us.
What would you say is the emotional toll like? I mean, we're all humans too, right? We're all humans. We all have emotions. I know when I was out there with you, it's hard not to take those stories home, or take those people's lives home with you.
Well, one thing about Latino Voices, it's an amazing thing. We go back to the civil rights. You know, in this country during Jim Crow, the African Americans, they were being abused and attacked by dogs and beat up, and people didn't see it because they would sit down at home and they don't see it in their home, so it was just news. But organizations like WTTW Latino Voices, you're putting it on film. You're putting it on so that they're able to see. So people now, they're sitting at home eating dinner, watching this, watching about homelessness in Chicago, Latino Voices. They're seeing it now, and now it makes a difference. It changes the heart. Okay, when you're not affected, people are not affected because they don't see it. Okay, or they turn a blind eye. You know, they turn a blind eye, and we had to at Ojalá Foundation. Not only are we attempting to give hope to the people that's under these bridges and in the streets, we're also giving hope to ourselves, to our family, to other people. We don't like to be on social media. This is because we're looking for good deeds from Allah, for Allah to accept it. But we have to, so that we can put this information out there so that people can see and recognize that this is going on. This is the United States of America. This is the freest country in the world, right? With the homeless population at what level? With the incarcerated level, people at what level? It should not be. There has to be a movement. There has to be a healing of the hearts of the people have become callous. The hearts of the of politicians and governments and bureaucracies need to be softened and realize, what if this was your uncle or your mother or your father or your son or your daughter? Okay, like you were talking about the children. People have to meet this challenge. Okay, we're supposed to be the greatest nation on the planet. Well, let's act like it then, and let's lift up those people that don't have no. Just reach out. Reach out. You can't lift the people up like with your hands closed like this. You can't. You have to.
We can all make a change. I want to go to Jose and Marty. What are your thoughts on what Raul is saying?
Well, as it relates to mental health, I mean, that's a great point because, as you said, Joanna, we all suffer from these issues, and mental health and physical health are both areas where our community, particularly Latino community, is disproportionately impacted. And especially when it comes to mental health, there still remains a stigma in our community, whether you're housed or unhoused. But when you're unhoused, it exacerbates. And what we're seeing at La Posada, we're seeing depression, bipolar issues. We're seeing anxiety, postpartum depression. And then we have a whole issues related to domestic violence, right? So we are trying to provide either direct service or, when we can't, to find community partners, hospitals, clinics to provide that service, because it is essential that we deal with the mental health. And then you look at issues like, there are resources out there at the federal level, for example, SSI, but we have families who have to apply for that. We have multiple families right now at La Posada that are waiting for their approval. And then when you look at the policy behind SSI, the other thing is we have to advocate for better policies. Casa and a lot of other nonprofits are advocating for an expansion of SSI benefits, because right now, if you're looking for disability SSI, the amount of money you have in your bank account, even though it's small, could disqualify you from that.
And Marty, talking about that, the last question that I have here, do you think the city could be doing anything to better assist people experiencing homelessness, or organizations like yours?
I think the city, the state, and the federal government can all be doing better. We're really reliant upon government at the end of the day to provide us with the resources that we need. And it would have been great to be able to have a law as opposed to a ballot initiative that said, okay, we're going to enact Bring Chicago Home as a piece of legislation, right? You look at our elected officials who are working on so many complex issues. One of them should be, how do we pass the kind of public policy into law so that we don't have to go through the vagaries of a ballot initiative and a ballot referendum? So there's a lot more that can be done. There's a lot of great things our government is doing for us and providing resources, but we can see that there's not enough, even to track people. The work that we do at La Posada, we know works. We track folks 6 months after they leave us formally, because those are the resources that we're given, funds to track them. And we know for a fact that over 90% of the people who leave us remain in stable housing at least 6 months out. We know they probably do it beyond that, but we're not funded to be able to track them and support them. We do still, anecdotally, whenever anyone who's been a participant in La Posada, even if it's past 6 months, they come back to us for help, support, direction, we do it. And we know that they've stayed stably housed well beyond that. So what we know, we do what we do, and we know that it works, but we need more resources and better collaboration and coordination.
Thank you. And Jose, any last comments?
I mean, I agree with Marty. Yes. I mean, we could always be doing, but we could all be doing better. Just to give you an example, and I mentioned over the pandemic how much we've grown, but, there's been an increased spotlight on the homelessness issue since the pandemic. But even in the last year, we housed 30,000 new arrivals in the city, over 30,000 new arrivals in the city of Chicago, and our entire state mobilized to be able to address that crisis. It's a good example of when the political will exists to end homelessness, we can make it happen. And so we have to make sure that nationally, at the state, at the city, and there are focused efforts. I want to make sure that it's clear that those efforts are happening, but that we got to continue to stay vigilant and continue to invest on the issue of housing, because that's the only way we're going to end homelessness.
Well, thinking we're out of time, Raul, any last words?
Yes. Someone once said, you have money for wars, but you can't feed the poor. What is that? There has to be a different mindset, man. This country is going through so much, right? And you spend all this spending on outside of the country and wars and battles. Let's take care of our people. Let's take care of our people, because our people are gonna, our children's children, we're leaving them with this situation. And it's horrifying. It's horrifying. We have to make a change, and we have to be the change. We have to be the change. And that means doing something, not just hoping, not just sitting back. Well, I hope that, that people get fed, or I hope. No. Go out there and make the change. Be the change. That's what we do.
I appreciate that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this great conversation. And we're out of time. Thank you to our panelists, José Munoz, Executive Director of La Casa Norte, Marty Castro, President and CEO of Casa Central, and Raul Gonzalez, member of the Ojalá Foundation, Latino Muslims of Chicago. And thank you to our viewers for participating in today's Latino Voices, a WTTW News Community Conversation. Feel free to submit any story ideas, topics, and issues what WTTW News needs to be covering at the email listed in the chat box. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please join us on Chicago Tonight Black Voices, which airs on Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. and Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, which I host every Thursday at 5:30. Now, thank you, take care, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you all.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.